The hotel only had one bed left, and the heater broke in the storm. But the thing that nearly stopped my heart was my ex-wife pulling back the blanket and saying, "Just get under, I'm freezing." My name is Daniel Cole. I'm 34, an architect who once lost a marriage to debt I was too ashamed to talk about. And the woman shivering under that single blanket was Mara, the wife I'd signed divorce papers with 2 winters ago. The wife I swore I'd never share a room with again. We weren't supposed to end up here. 2 exes, 1 snowstorm, 1 hotel with a single room left, and a heater that died at midnight while the wind screamed against the glass. She offered me the other half of the blanket like it meant nothing, but her hands were trembling, and not just from the cold. Because the last time we were this close, we were strangers, wearing wedding rings, drowning in money fights neither of us knew how to survive. And now the storm had locked us in a room with 1 bed, no heat, and 7 years of things we'd never said out loud. 3 hours earlier, I had a plan. Drive up the mountain, attend the architecture conference, shake some hands, win a contract or 2, and drive home Sunday without a single complication. That was the plan. But the storm laughed at my plan. The roads closed behind me one by one. The radio voice crackled out warnings about black ice and falling branches, and I gripped the wheel tighter, telling myself I was almost there. Then I pulled into the hotel lot, snow stinging my face like tiny needles, and another car slid in right beside mine. A woman climbed out, hood up, shoulders hunched against the wind, and something in the way she moved made my whole body freeze before my brain could catch up. I knew that walk. I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. Mara. She looked up, and her hood slipped back just enough to show that auburn hair, those green eyes, that once looked at me like I was the answer to every question she had. Now they looked at me like I was a bill she couldn't afford to pay. "Daniel," she said. My name came out of her mouth like something she'd hoped never to say again. Mara. My voice cracked on the single word. We stood there in the freezing wind, 2 people who had once promised each other forever, now standing apart like strangers, who'd taken the same wrong exit off the highway of their lives. Inside, the lobby was warm and golden, a fire crackling in a stone hearth, the smell of cedar and coffee wrapping around us. It should have felt like rescue. Instead, it felt like a door quietly locking behind us. The young man at the front desk smiled the way only someone who has no idea what he's about to do can smile. "Cole, party of 1?" he typed, then frowned. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. We just gave away the last single room about 10 minutes ago. The storm stranded half the highway. We're completely full." My stomach dropped. His eyes moved to Mara. "Are you 2 together?" "No," we said at the exact same second. Too fast, too loud. He blinked. "Okay, well, I have exactly 1 room left in the entire hotel. King suite, fireplace. I can offer it at a split rate if you're both with the conference." Mara's jaw went tight. I watched her run through every escape in her mind, driving back into the blizzard, sleeping in her car, sitting up all night in this lobby with a stranger she used to be married to. I watched every option die behind her eyes. "Fine," she said, staring at the desk, not at me. "Just for tonight." "Fine," I echoed, because my pride wouldn't let hers be the only one bending. That hallway was the longest walk of my life. Her suitcase wheels hummed against the carpet. My heart pounded loud enough that I was sure she could hear it. 2 years of silence walked between us like a third person. The room was beautiful, in a way that felt almost cruel. A stone fireplace, thick quilts the color of wine and gold. A wide window looking out over a valley the storm had already swallowed in white. And 1 bed. 1 huge, undeniable, impossible-to-ignore bed. "I'll take the chair," I said instantly, pointing at an armchair that looked built for decoration, not for sleeping. "You won't fit in that chair, Daniel." She dropped her bag at the foot of the bed. "You're 6'2". You'll wreck your back and complain about it for a week." "I don't complain." "You complained about the dishwasher for 3 years. The dishwasher was broken. For 3 years. And there it was, a tiny crack of something familiar. The corner of her mouth almost lifted before she caught it and pressed it flat again. We unpacked on opposite sides of the room, like 2 soldiers marking territory. She hung her coat. I checked the thermostat, out of pure habit, the way you check a phone for messages you know aren't coming. The little screen blinked once. Then it died. "That's not good," I said. "What?" "Heater just shut off." Mara crossed the room, hugging herself, and stared at the dead screen like she could scare it back to life. She grabbed the hotel phone, dialed the desk, and I watched her shoulders sink lower with every second she spent on hold. "They said the whole East Wing's heating is down from the storm," she said, hanging up. "Maintenance can't reach us until morning, at the earliest." She pressed her palm hard against her forehead. Of course this is happening tonight." And just like that, my mind betrayed me. It dragged me back 3 winters, to a kitchen that smelled of burnt coffee and panic, with unpaid bills spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom. Mara's hands had been shaking that night too, not from cold. "There's a collections notice here, Daniel," she'd said, in a voice so flat it scared me more than screaming ever could. "With your name on it, from 4 months ago." I hadn't told her. That was my real crime, not the debt itself, but the silence I built around it, brick by brick, until neither of us could see the other through the wall. "Daniel," her voice in the present snapped me back. "You're staring at that wall like it owes you money." "Sorry," I muttered. "Just thinking." About what? The truth sat right there on my tongue. I was thinking about the night I broke us, before any storm ever had the chance. But I swallowed it, the way I always had. "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking we need more blankets." She looked at me a beat too long, like she knew exactly what kind of nothing that was. But she let it go, because one of our oldest habits had always been knowing when not to push. We found 2 spare quilts in the closet. We stuffed towels along the drafty window. We even tried to build a small fire in the stone hearth, using complimentary matches that seemed to actively hate us. "You were a Boy Scout," I said, watching her fail for the 3rd time. "For 4 months. I got kicked out." "Why?" I told the troop leader his fire safety lecture was inefficient. And despite everything, despite the cold and the silence, and the 2 years between us, I laughed. A real laugh. It surprised me on the way out. She looked up at the sound, and something crossed her face that looked like grief and hope wearing the very same expression. Together we finally coaxed the fire into a weak, flickering warmth. We sat near it, not touching, the heat barely reaching our knees while the rest of the room held its cold like a grudge. Outside, the wind screamed, and somewhere far off, a branch cracked and crashed into the snow. "Do you remember?" Mara said quietly, staring into the flames. "The night the heater broke in our first house, the first winter we were married?" My chest tightened. "I remember. You wrapped me in that ugly green blanket my mother gave us and promised you'd build me a house one day, with a fireplace in every room. I was an idealistic idiot. You were sweet," she said softly. "Before the money, before you stopped telling me things." The fire popped between us. The old shame climbed up my throat like it had never left. "I should have told you about the loan," I said, and the words finally broke free after 2 years of silence. "About all of it. The missed payments, the second loan I took without asking you. The calls I let go to voicemail because I couldn't stand hearing how badly I'd failed us. I thought if I just fixed it before you found out, it would be like it never happened. I didn't understand that the hiding was the thing breaking us, not the debt." Mara didn't speak. She just watched me, firelight flickering gold across her face, her green eyes shining with something she was fighting hard not to let fall. "I didn't need a man who could fix everything," she whispered. "I needed a partner, not someone managing me like I was a problem to solve." The room went silent. Just the wind, just the fire, just 2 years finally cracking open between us. And then, as if the storm had been waiting for that exact moment, the lights flickered once, twice, and the whole room dropped into total darkness. Mara gasped. I heard her shift toward the fire on instinct, her hand reaching out blindly until it found my arm and gripped it. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's freezing. Just get under the blanket, please." And there it was, the exact words from the very beginning, except now I understood the weight buried underneath them. The years, the wounds, the apology folded inside 6 small words. I didn't move. I sat there in the dark, her cold hand on my arm, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to break free, and finally say everything I'd been too afraid to say the first time around. Because getting under that blanket wasn't about the cold. We both knew it. It was about whether two people who had already failed each other once were brave enough to be that close again. Mara, I said into the dark, if I get under there, we're going to have to actually talk. About everything. Not the careful version, the real one. For a long moment, all I heard was the wind and the fire and her breathing. Then her hand tightened on my arm. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm asking. I moved before I could talk myself out of it. The blanket was heavier than I remembered blankets being. Thick wool that smelled faintly of cedar from the closet. And underneath it, Mara was shaking, really shaking. The kind of cold that gets into your bones and makes your teeth want to chatter, even when you're trying to stay composed in front of someone you used to love. I sat beside her, careful, leaving space between us, out of old instinct. The kind of distance two people build when they've learned that closeness can hurt. You don't have to sit like you're at a job interview, she said into the dark, and I heard the smallest thread of laughter trying to climb back into her voice. Get closer. I'm not made of glass. So I did. I shifted until our shoulders touched, until I could feel the cold radiating off her coat sleeve, and for a second, neither of us said anything. The fire had burned down to embers, throwing a low orange glow across the room that made everything feel smaller, more honest, like the dark had stripped away every reason we had to keep performing politeness. Tell me about the loan, she said quietly. All of it. Don't protect me from it this time. My throat tightened. 2 years ago, I would have changed the subject, found some clever exit, some joke to slide us both back into safer water. But something about the cold, the dark, the way her hand was still resting near mine on top of the blanket, made running feel impossible. After my dad died, I started, and my voice came out rougher than I meant it to. I felt like I had to prove something. He never thought the firm would work. He used to say architecture was a hobby pretending to be a career, and when he passed, some stupid part of me decided I had to make it succeed so badly that I stopped being honest about how close it was to falling apart. Mara was quiet, listening the way she used to when we were first married, fully, without interrupting, like my words actually mattered to her. There was a contract that fell through, I continued. The Hendricks building. We'd already hired 2 new guys, already put a deposit on equipment. When it fell apart, I panicked. I took a loan against the house without telling you, because I thought if I just covered the gap fast enough, you'd never have to know we were ever in danger. Then another contract slipped, then another loan. And every month I told myself, just one more month, I'll tell her once it's fixed. It was never going to be fixed that way, Mara said softly. I know that now. You didn't trust me, she said, and her voice cracked on the word trust, the syllables breaking apart like ice underfoot. That's what hurt the most, Daniel. Not the money. I grew up with nothing, you know that. I could have handled broke. What I couldn't handle was finding out you'd been carrying all of it alone, like I wasn't strong enough to carry any of it with you. The words hit harder than anything she could have screamed at me. Because she was right. I had built my silence out of shame, but shame had quietly told me she was someone to be protected from the truth, instead of someone to stand beside in it. I thought providing meant protecting you from bad news, I admitted. I didn't understand that providing actually meant trusting you enough to let you in, even when the news was ugly. Mara turned her head toward me in the dark, and even with barely any light I could see her eyes shining, the kind of shine that comes right before tears finally let go. Do you know what the worst night was? She asked. I shook my head, though I suspected I already knew. The collections call, she said, not because of the number, but because the woman on the phone knew more about our finances than I did. She asked me questions about loans I didn't even know existed. I stood in our kitchen, holding the phone, realizing my own husband had built an entire secret life out of fear, and I wasn't in it. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the cold creeping through the blanket. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I wasn't sure I'd earned that yet. I'm sorry, I said, the words feeling impossibly small against the size of what I owed her. Not the kind of sorry I said back then, the rehearsed kind, trying to fix things fast so the discomfort would go away. I mean the kind of sorry that actually sits with how much I hurt you. Mara wiped at her face with the edge of the blanket. A small, almost embarrassed motion. I used to think if you'd just told me the truth, even the worst version of it, I could have stayed. We could have figured it out together. That's the part I never got to grieve properly. Not losing the money. Losing the chance to actually fight for something with you instead of fighting against a wall of silence. The wind outside howled louder, rattling the window in its frame. And somewhere down the hall, I heard another door slam from the storm's pressure. But in our small dark room, none of that mattered. There was only this. The two of us finally saying the things that should have been said 3 winters ago, in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee and fear. After the divorce, I said, surprising myself with how easily the next confession came, I went to therapy. First time in my life. I kept circling back to one thing every session. It wasn't the debt that scared me most. It was the idea of you looking at me and seeing someone who failed. I would have rather lost you than let you see me as anything less than capable. And instead, Mara said, voice barely above a whisper, you lost me by trying so hard not to. The truth of that landed in the dark between us, like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading out, touching every memory, every fight, every silence we'd ever shared. I started keeping a budget spreadsheet, I said after a moment, needing to fill the quiet with something other than my own guilt. After the divorce, every dollar, logged, transparent, even though there was no one left to show it to. I think some stupid part of me thought if I learned to be honest about money with no one watching, maybe one day I'd deserve to be honest about it with someone again. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she shifted closer under the blanket, close enough that I could feel the warmth finally building between us, our combined heat doing what the dead heater couldn't. Show me sometime, she said, the spreadsheet. My heart stumbled over itself. You want to see my spreadsheet? I want to see the man who built it, she said, because the Daniel I divorced couldn't say the word debt out loud without changing the subject. The Daniel sitting next to me right now just told me about missed payments without flinching once. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Therapy. 20 months of very expensive, very humbling therapy. A small, surprised laugh escaped her, the sound cutting cleanly through the heaviness in the room. Look at that. The man finally invested in something that actually paid off. Low blow, I said, but I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since I'd seen her step out of her car in the parking lot. We sat like that for a while, shoulder to shoulder, the fire reduced to a dull orange glow, the wind slowly losing some of its fury outside. I could feel her breathing settle, feel the trembling in her shoulders ease as warmth slowly returned between us. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. Anything? Why did you come to this conference? You hate conferences. You used to fake migraines to get out of the Christmas one. I let out a slow breath, watching the embers pulse in the hearth. Caleb's company nominated me for a panel on sustainable housing design. I almost said no. Then I thought about how much I used to avoid risk after the divorce. How small I'd made my life trying to protect myself from ever failing that publicly again. So I said yes, out of spite for my own fear, mostly. That sounds like growth, Mara said. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to protect. She laughed again, softer this time, and rested her head, almost without thinking, against my shoulder. The gesture was so natural, so familiar, that for a second, I forgot 2 years had passed at all. It felt like no time had moved, like we'd simply paused a conversation mid-sentence and were only now picking it back up. Why did you come? I asked. Same reason, honestly, she said. I'm presenting on affordable housing initiatives tomorrow. I almost canceled 3 times this week. Some part of me kept hoping the storm would give me an excuse to bail. And instead, it gave you me, I said. And instead it gave me you, she echoed. And there was something in her voice, something soft and unguarded, that hadn't been there in years. We sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the storm slowly losing its grip on the world outside, the wind softening from a scream to a low, steady moan. My arm had somehow found its way around her shoulders, not entirely sure when that happened, only sure that it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in 2 years. "Daniel," she said quietly, her voice almost lost beneath the crackle of the dying fire. "Yeah?" "I'm scared." "Of what?" She lifted her head, looking at me in the dim orange light, her eyes searching mine with a vulnerability I hadn't seen since the very beginning of us, back before bills and silence and slow building walls. "That tomorrow the power comes back on, the heater fixes itself, the storm clears, and we go back to being two people who used to be married and nothing else. That tonight was just the storm talking, not us." My chest ached with the weight of her fear, because it mirrored my own so exactly it almost stole my breath. "Mara," I said, reaching up to gently brush a strand of hair away from her face, my hand trembling slightly, whether from cold or nerves I couldn't tell anymore. "This isn't the storm talking. The storm just stripped away the noise long enough for us to finally hear each other again." Her breath caught, and for a moment neither of us moved. The space between us, thick with 2 years of longing, neither of us had allowed ourselves to admit until tonight. "I don't want to go back to pretending I'm okay without you," I said, the words rising up from somewhere deep and unguarded. "I've been doing that for 2 years, and I'm tired. Mara, I'm so tired of being okay alone." Her eyes filled, and this time the tears did fall, slow and silent, tracing down her cheeks in the dying firelight. "I don't either," she whispered. And in that moment, in the dark, in the cold, with the storm finally beginning to quiet outside the window, something between us shifted, fragile and new, like the very first warmth of a fire just beginning to truly catch. I woke up before the sun did, the kind of waking that comes from a body too full of feeling to stay asleep. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then I felt the warmth against my side, steady breathing, the faint smell of vanilla and rain still clinging to her hair, and I remembered everything. The storm, the blanket, the dark room where 2 years of silence finally broke open. Mara was still asleep, her hand resting flat against my chest, right over my heart, like even unconscious some part of her wanted to keep checking it was still beating. The fire had died down to ash hours ago. The room was cold again, but I didn't feel it. Not really. Some kinds of warmth don't come from a heater. Outside, the storm had stopped sometime in the night. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see a sky scrubbed pale blue, snow piled high and silent across the valley, the world looking washed clean, like it had cried itself out, and finally felt better. I lay there for a long time, not moving, terrified that if I shifted even slightly, I'd wake her and the spell would break, and we'd go back to being two careful strangers, folding towels into separate suitcases. So I just stayed still, memorizing the weight of her hand on my chest, the soft rhythm of her breathing, trying to burn the moment into memory in case it never happened again. "You're thinking too loud," Mara mumbled, eyes still closed. "I can feel it." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Sorry." "What are you thinking about?" "That I don't want to move, in case this is the only morning I get like this." Her eyes opened then, slowly, and she looked up at me, with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Soft, unguarded, free of the armor she used to wear like a second skin. "Daniel, I've been awake for 10 minutes, pretending to be asleep, because I didn't want this morning to end either." Something in my chest cracked open, gently, like the first thaw after a long winter. We didn't rush getting up. We lay there a while longer, talking about small things that somehow felt enormous. What she'd ordered for breakfast that morning 2 years ago on our anniversary, the name of the dog we always said we'd get someday and never did, whether the firm could survive me taking next Christmas off entirely instead of working through it the way I always had. Eventually, hunger and the late hour pulled us out of bed. The heater had kicked back on sometime before dawn. The room finally warm, almost too warm now, like the universe had decided it had made its point and didn't need to torture us any further. Mara showered first. I sat by the window, watching maintenance trucks crawl slowly down the cleared road below, and I thought about how strange it was that a broken heater had done what 2 years of silence, never could. It had stripped away every excuse we'd built between us, and left only the truth standing in the room. When she came out, hair damp, wrapped in the hotel robe, she paused at the foot of the bed and looked at me with a seriousness that made my stomach tighten. "I have to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to actually answer it, not the careful version." "Okay. Is this a one-night thing, because the storm trapped us together and made us emotional? Or is this something you actually want to try again?" I stood up, crossed the room, and took both her hands in mine, feeling how much steadier they were now than they'd been the night before, no longer trembling from cold or fear. "Mara, I've sat in an empty house for 2 years, setting the thermostat exactly the way you liked it, even though you weren't there to feel it. I kept doing it because some part of me was still hoping you'd walk back through that door someday, and I wanted you to feel warm the second you did." My voice shook, but I kept going. "This isn't the storm talking. The storm just finally made me brave enough to say what I should have said the night you found those bills." Her eyes filled again, but this time she was smiling through it. "What's that?" "That I'm sorry. That I should have trusted you with the hard parts, not just the easy ones. That I want a real chance to be the partner you actually deserved the first time around. Debt and all, fear and all, no more locked doors between us." She closed the distance between us and kissed me, slow and certain, nothing like the desperate, fumbling uncertainty of the night before. This kiss felt like a decision, like two people choosing each other on purpose, with their eyes wide open, knowing exactly what they were walking back into, and choosing it anyway. "I want to try," she whispered against my lips. "But slowly, Daniel, real slowly. No skipping the hard conversations this time." "Slowly," I agreed. "I can do slowly. I've gotten very good at patience these last 2 years." We made it down to the conference an hour late, both of us a little rumpled, both of us unable to stop the small smiles that kept sneaking onto our faces every time our eyes met across a crowded room. Caleb, my business partner, took one look at us during the lunch break and nearly choked on his coffee. "Wait," he said slowly. "Wait, wait, wait. Are you two? Did the storm?" "Don't," I warned, but I was grinning. "I knew it," he said. "I told Priya the second I heard you both got snowed in together that something was going to happen." "Nothing happened," Mara said primly, though the blush on her cheeks told a different story. "Sure," Caleb said, "and the dishwasher was broken for 3 years for totally unrelated reasons." Mara laughed so hard she had to set down her coffee, and I felt something settle deep in my chest, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years, watching her laugh like that again. Easy, unguarded, like the weight she'd been carrying had finally found somewhere safe to set itself down. We drove back to the city separately that afternoon, because some promises take time to build trust again, even good ones. But before she pulled out of the parking lot, she rolled down her window, snow still piled along the curb, sun finally breaking weakly through the clouds. "Same time next month?" she asked. "There's a sustainability summit in Portland. I already checked. They have rooms with 2 beds. 2 beds, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "For now," she said, smiling. "Like I said, slowly." I watched her drive away, taillights disappearing around the bend, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel the familiar ache of watching her go. I felt something steadier underneath it. Hope. Real, patient, earned hope. 3 months later, I drove up to that same hotel on purpose this time. No storm forcing my hand. No broken heater making the decision for me. Mara was already in the lobby when I arrived, sitting by that same stone fireplace, and when she looked up and saw me, her whole face lit up in a way that made every hard conversation, every slow Sunday phone call, every nervous dinner, where we relearned how to trust each other, completely worth it. "I requested the same room," she said, standing to meet me. "I asked them to fix the heater this time, though. I think we've learned enough about being cold together." I laughed, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home after a very long, very cold winter. "I don't know. The broken heater worked out pretty well for us." "Don't push your luck, Cole." That night, we sat by the same fireplace, except this time there was no desperation in it, no fear, Just two people who had done the hard work of becoming honest with each other again, choosing, on purpose, every single day since that storm, to keep choosing one another. Before the fire burned low, I got down on one knee, right there on that same worn rug, and asked her to marry me again, properly this time, with every secret already spoken, every wall already taken down brick by brick. She said yes before I even finished the question. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet this time. No wind, no storm, no broken heater forcing two people together. Just snow falling gently over a valley that had once watched two strangers wearing wedding rings nearly lose everything, and was now watching them build it all back, stronger, with the lights on, the heater running, and nothing left unsaid between them. So let me ask you something before you go. If a storm stripped away every excuse you've been hiding behind and left you alone in the dark with the one person you used to love, the one person you still haven't told the whole truth to, would you finally say the words you've been too afraid to say? Or would you stay quiet, the way Daniel almost did, and let the silence cost you everything all over again? Sit with that question for a second. Really sit with it. Because somewhere out there tonight, someone you love is waiting for you to finally be brave enough to tell them the truth. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own broken heater, your own unspoken truth, your own version of Mara or Daniel, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because stories like this one are coming every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one. And before you go, tell me honestly in the comments below, have you ever stayed silent about something that ended up costing you the person you loved most? I'm reading every single comment tonight.